when Judge Amy Coney Barrett cut Jasmine Crockett off with an icy stare. No one expected what happened next. The courtroom wasn't prepared. The audience watching from home wasn't prepared. And certainly, Barrett herself wasn't prepared for what she had just unleashed. It started in a voice that was calm, almost dismissive, like a teacher scolding a child for speaking out of turn. "Congresswoman Crockett," Barrett said, her words slow and sharp as a knife, "you will confine yourself to the question at hand. This courtroom is not the place for political theatrics." The hush that followed was heavy. Cameras clicked, pens froze over notepads, and a wave of tension spread like static through the chamber. Crockett's eyes flickered. Shock, yes, but not submission. She did not bow her head, did not retreat into silence. Instead, she looked directly at Barrett, her expression a mixture of disbelief and simmering resolve. In that single instant, a hierarchy was exposed for the nation to see. On one side sat the robed judge, cloaked in centuries of institutional authority. On the other, a black congresswoman from Texas, younger, underestimated, accused before she could even defend herself. It was a tableau as old as America itself. Power trying to crush voice. Dignity colliding with dismissal. The room belonged to Barrett. She knew it. Every word she spoke reverberated with the weight of judicial power. "You are out of order," she pressed, voice rising, her gavel striking wood in a hollow thunder. "Sit down." For a heartbeat, Crockett said nothing. She sat back, lips pressed together, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. The gallery leaned forward. Even the stenographer, usually immune to drama, faltered in her typing. Social media feeds lit up with whispers and gasps. "Did you see the way Barrett just spoke to her? Is she serious? Crockett doesn't deserve that." To Barrett, this was order. To the crowd, it looked like arrogance. And to Jasmine Crockett, it was something else entirely. It was fuel. Crockett adjusted the microphone in front of her. Her fingers tapped the desk lightly. 1, 2, 3 taps. Like a boxer testing the ropes before the first punch. She inhaled slowly, controlled, deliberate, and the cameras zoomed in. The nation held its breath. Because here, in this moment, lines had been drawn. Judge Barrett had framed Crockett not as a legislator with a voice worth hearing, but as an intruder in a space too hallowed for her. It was an attack dressed in civility, a silencing delivered with a polished smile. Yet what Barrett failed to realize was that she had written the prologue to her own undoing. Crockett's silence was not retreat. It was calculation. Behind her eyes, a storm gathered. Each second she remained wordless, the tension grew tighter, like a violin string pulled to its breaking point. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, uncertain of whether to linger on Barrett's stern expression or Crockett's poised stillness. And then, for a fleeting moment, Barrett leaned back, almost satisfied, as though she had reclaimed control. She could not have been more mistaken. Because power doesn't only belong to the robe. Sometimes power belongs to the words yet unspoken, the rebuttal yet unleashed. The audience couldn't see it, but Crockett's silence was strategy. She was about to do something no one expected, something that would not just answer Barrett's attack, but flip the very balance of the trial itself. The silence stretched, the anticipation swelled, and then, but what Crockett did in the next 5 minutes changed everything. The courtroom carried the kind of silence that feels alive, breathing, waiting, almost trembling beneath the weight of what was about to happen. The wood-paneled walls, polished to a gleam, seemed to lean inward, listening. Rows of benches creaked under the pressure of curious bodies, and the low hum of whispered speculation buzzed just beneath the surface. At the back, cameras blinked like restless eyes, red recording lights glowing as though even the machines sensed history circling in the air. This was no ordinary proceeding. This was theater, wrapped in the trappings of law. The rules of evidence and order mattered. Yes, but what mattered more was perception, power, and the sway of narrative. Every sentence uttered, every look exchanged, had the potential to ripple far beyond these 4 walls, spilling into living rooms, news cycles, and the unforgiving court of public opinion. At the center of it all sat Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Her robe was immaculate, her posture sharp, her eyes steady. To some, she was the picture of discipline and intellectual rigor. To others, she was a fortress of ideology, conservative to her bones, a figure of untouchable authority. Her reputation preceded her. She wielded control with precision, never betraying emotion, never yielding the upper hand. To her allies, she was untouchable. To her critics, she was unyielding. Barrett had built her legacy on the image of control. She rarely raised her voice because she didn't have to. Her authority was not requested. It was assumed, demanded, enforced. When she spoke, It was with the calculated cadence of someone accustomed to ending conversations rather than continuing them. Power for her was not up for debate. It was a fact, and she wore it like armor. And on this day, seated across from her, was a woman who had walked into that courtroom knowing the odds stacked against her. Jasmine Crockett, young, sharp, unapologetically herself. Her style was different. She didn't radiate the cold distance of judicial power. She radiated energy. Calm, yes, but a calm forged in fire, the calm of someone who had been underestimated her entire career and had learned to use that underestimation as her greatest weapon. Crockett sat in contrast to Barrett in every way. Where Barrett's demeanor was rigid, Crockett's was fluid, alive. Where Barrett was cloaked in the uniformity of a robe, Crockett wore her identity unapologetically, her voice carrying the cadence of her community, her heritage, her lived experience. To Barrett, she might have looked like just another challenger in a space Barrett believed she controlled. But Crockett knew better. She knew that in spaces like these, perception could flip overnight, and she was prepared. The air between the two women was charged, though they had not yet exchanged a word. It was the kind of charge that precedes storms, the kind that makes the hair on your arms rise before thunder ever rolls. Even those who didn't understand the specifics of the case could feel it. This wasn't just about law. This wasn't just about testimony. This was about power, and who had the right to wield it. Barrett's gaze scanned the room, landing on Crockett for a fraction of a second longer than it needed to. It wasn't overt hostility. It was something subtler. Dismissal. That look judges give when they've already made up their mind about who is credible and who is not. A quiet but cutting judgment that speaks louder than a gavel. Crockett caught it. She always caught it. And though her face remained neutral, her mind began to move quickly. She had seen this before, in boardrooms, in committee hearings, in interviews. The glance that said, "You don't belong here. You don't measure up." But Crockett had built her career on shattering exactly that assumption, piece by piece until disbelief turned into grudging respect. For the gallery, it looked like two women waiting their turn to speak. For those who understood the layers, it looked like a duel waiting for its first strike. The audience sensed it too. The whispers rose and fell like waves. "That's Barrett. That's Crockett. This is going to get heated." Phones lit up under the benches as spectators prepared to clip moments, share reactions, tweet takes before the hearing even began. Because this wasn't just legal theater, it was cultural theater, and everyone knew the storylines were already forming. Hero and villain, order and resistance, authority and voice. But here's the truth that no camera could fully capture. Jasmine Crockett did not come to play defense. She came prepared for war, her kind of war, fought not with robes and gavels, but with precision, with composure, and with the undeniable power of truth spoken plainly. Barrett, for her part, believed she had already won. For years, she had stood unchallenged in rooms like this. Her authority cemented, her words final. What she didn't know, what she could, to her this was not a debate. It was domination. Judge Amy Coney Barrett had not climbed the rungs of America's highest courts by softening her edges or conceding ground. No, her weapon was composure sharpened into arrogance, order wielded as a sword. She projected control in every syllable, every glance, every decision. And in this courtroom, she intended to remind Jasmine, Crockett, and everyone else watching that power was not shared. It was possessed. Barrett's presence radiated a cold authority. Her robe was not cloth. It was armor. Her gavel was not a tool. It was a weapon. She carried herself as if her word were not simply law in the room, but truth itself. To challenge her was to step into a storm designed to swallow you whole. And she knew it. That knowledge curled at the edges of her smile. An expression that was less warmth than warning. It wasn't the first time the public had seen this side of her. Clips from past hearings lingered online. Moments where her dismissive tone, her clipped interruptions, her refusal to acknowledge nuance had left witnesses looking smaller, diminished, out of place. To Barrett, it was efficiency. To the watching world, it reeked of arrogance. Twitter, of course, had its receipts. Memes of Barrett's stony expressions floated through timelines. Threads broke down her history of rulings, noting a pattern of coldness, rigidity, a willingness to dismiss perspectives that didn't mirror her own. "She doesn't listen, she lectures," one viral tweet read. Another captioned a freeze frame of her glare with the words, "This is the face of someone who thinks the robe makes her untouchable." On Instagram Reels, activists had cut together montages, Barrett's gavel slamming, her eyes narrowing, her voice silencing dissent. Over the footage, a haunting narration. This isn't impartiality. This is control. Each clip, each headline, each shared video built a digital mythology. Around her, a mythology not of fairness, but of fear. And yet, to Barrett's supporters, that was the point. They admired her for it. She's strong. She doesn't take nonsense. She commands respect. To them, her rigidity was proof of discipline, her dismissal of opposition, a badge of intellectual superiority. But for millions watching from the outside, especially those who had felt dismissed, silenced, or written off in their own lives, Barrett embodied something darker. She was not a guardian of justice. She was the face of its imbalance. Her strategy in the courtroom was clear. Overwhelm, interrupt, control the narrative before it ever had a chance to unfold. Crockett's words were not threats to be countered, but inconveniences to be silenced. Barrett's tone carried the unspoken message. I decide what matters here, not you, and the arrogance of it all was impossible to ignore. She leaned on her authority as if it were infallible, as though centuries of systemic power had ordained her role not just to interpret law, but to determine whose voice was worthy of being heard. The robe, the gavel, the elevated seat, they became symbols of distance, reminders of a hierarchy in which Barrett was firmly at the top. Even those in the gallery, who admired her skill, couldn't miss the sharpness in her methods. It was in the way she spoke over Crockett, her voice rising just enough to swallow Crockett's sentence. It was in the way her eyes flicked dismissively when Crockett tried to clarify. It was in the deliberate cadence of her words, designed to bruise with authority rather than invite dialogue. On TikTok, creators dissected her demeanor. Notice how she doesn't just interrupt, she undercuts, one said, pausing a clip where Barrett cut off Crockett mid-thought. This is about more than order. It's about erasure. Another video compared Barrett's treatment of Crockett with her softer tone toward male colleagues, sparking debates about double standards that spread across feeds. Hashtags emerged. Barrett bias, courtroom arrogance, leatherspeak. Everywhere you looked, Barrett's image was becoming not the measured, brilliant jurist her allies praised, but a caricature of unchecked authority, a symbol of power that feared challenge. And yet, here she was again, performing the same dance she had perfected. Cut off the challenger, tighten control, project dominance. In her mind, this wasn't cruelty, it was discipline. It wasn't arrogance, it was duty. But to the millions tuned in, watching with clenched fists and rising anger, it felt like something else. It felt like the same old story. A woman of color told to sit down, a voice of dissent framed as disorder, a truth dismissed before it was even spoken. The outrage spilled in real time. She's not even letting Crockett finish her sentence. One tweet read, racking up thousands of retweets in minutes. This isn't justice, it's intimidation, another declared. On Facebook live streams, comments scrolled so fast they blurred. She's scared of what Crockett's about to say. This is abuse of power. She thinks the robe makes her God. But the most viral comment was the simplest. Every interruption tells us exactly what she's afraid of, the truth. The longer Barrett leaned into her role as the immovable judge, the more the public saw cracks in her armor. What she framed as authority looked more and more like insecurity. What she called control resembled fear. And with every dismissive glance, every sharp word, every echo of her gavel, she wasn't strengthening her grip. She was fueling resistance. Barrett had written this script many times before. She was the authority. The challenger was the disruption. And the ending was inevitable. Submission to the robe. She believed this day would play out the same way. She believed Crockett would shrink beneath her glare, stumble under her interruptions, fade into the background of judicial power. But this time she was wrong. Because Jasmine Crockett wasn't about to play the role. Barrett had written for her. The gavel struck once, a hollow echo that reverberated off the paneled walls like a warning shot. Judge Amy Coney Barrett leaned forward, her tone crisp, surgical. Congresswoman Crockett, she said, voice cutting through the air with that familiar edge of superiority. You will answer the question directly. This courtroom is not a stage for speeches. You are here to provide clarity, not grandstanding. It was an opening strike, deliberate and public. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line of authority. She didn't simply disagree. She sought to undercut, to paint Jasmine Crockett as unruly, unfocused, unworthy of the forum she stood in. Gasps rippled faintly through the gallery. A journalist's pen froze mid-stroke. The camera zoomed in, capturing Crockett's face in that exact moment. The stunned pause, the flicker of disbelief. A young staffer in the back row clenched his fists beneath the bench, knuckles whitening. You could almost hear the nation inhale collectively. Barrett leaned back, satisfied, the faintest curl of a smirk tugging at the edge of her expression. She believed she had seized control early, that Crockett's silence meant submission. But Crockett's silence was not weakness, it was strategy. Her hands folded neatly in front of her. She didn't rush to defend herself, didn't stumble into the trap Barrett had set. Instead, she let the silence expand, heavy and deliberate. Every second she didn't speak made the room lean in further, straining to hear what would come next. Her eyes locked on Barrett, unblinking, steady, like a fighter studying her opponent's footwork before the first jab. And still Barrett pressed. "You will not turn this into a spectacle," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice the air. "If you cannot contain yourself, you will be excused." The words hung like smoke in the chamber. Spectacle. Contain yourself. Excused. They weren't just procedural corrections. They were character. Assassinations dressed as formality. They painted Crockett as hysterical before she had even spoken. A danger to order in a place Barrett believed only she defined. The murmurs rose louder now. Some in the gallery frowned. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Phones buzzed in purses. Reporters exchanging knowing glances. This wasn't about procedure anymore. This was about power. Crockett remained still, her expression composed but her jaw tight. Beneath the table, her nails pressed into her palm, leaving crescents of pressure. Her silence spoke louder than any outburst could have. It told Barrett, "I hear you. I see what you're doing. And I will choose my moment to strike." Close-ups from the cameras captured everything. The furrow in Barrett's brow, the tension tightening Crockett's shoulders, the wide eyes of a man seated in the second row, lips parted as if he were watching a high-wire act without a net. On social media, the clips spread in real time. Did Barrett just tell Crockett to contain herself? One tweet read, the disbelief punctuated with fire emojis. "This is bias on display," another shot across the timeline. TikTok edits slowed down the gavel strike, set it to ominous music, freezing on Crockett's face as if to say, "Watch what comes next." But inside the courtroom, there was no soundtrack. No captions, only the unbearable quiet of waiting. Barrett tapped her pen against the bench in impatient rhythm. She mistook Crockett's composure for hesitation, her stillness for defeat. "Answer the question, Congresswoman," Barrett said again, her tone sharper now, almost snapping. "This court will not tolerate delay." And still, Crockett did not rush. Her breathing was measured, her gaze fixed, her silence expanding into defiance. The tension was palpable, vibrating through the room like a struck string. Even the gallery seemed frozen, leaning forward as though gravity itself pulled them. Closer to the unfolding confrontation. Finally, Crockett moved. Just slightly, adjusting the microphone, clearing her throat softly. A simple gesture, but one that signaled readiness. The room seemed to exhale, bracing for what was about to come. Barrett stiffened, prepared to swat down whatever Crockett dared to say. But Crockett's pause had shifted the energy. She had taken Barrett's attempt to control the stage and turned it into anticipation, making the audience, indeed, the entire country, ache to hear her first words. Her voice when it came was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that makes the hair on your arms rise, the calm of a storm right before it unleashes. She began slowly, deliberately, each word measured, the rhythm hypnotic. "I will answer the question," Crockett said, eyes never leaving Barrett's, "but I will not allow this courtroom, or anyone in it, to decide what parts of my truth are acceptable to hear." The words landed like a tremor beneath the floorboards. A few in the gallery gasped audibly. Barrett's face tightened, her grip on the gavel firming. Cameras caught the flicker of fire in Crockett's eyes, a flash of defiance contained within composure. The silence that followed was not the silence of intimidation, it was the silence of recalibration. Everyone in the room knew the temperature had shifted. Barrett had intended to set the terms of engagement, but Crockett had claimed the right to define herself. Barrett's nostrils flared as she prepared her next interruption, but Crockett wasn't finished, not yet. Her voice grew stronger now, still calm but edged with steel. "I respect this court," she said. "But respect is not the same as obedience. Respect is earned by fairness, not demanded by force." The gallery erupted in a soft wave of murmurs. Someone stifled an exclamation. Another leaned into their neighbor, whispering, "She's not backing down." Even the stenographer paused, eyes flicking up for just a second before returning to her keys. Barrett raised her gavel as if to cut her off again. But this time, the weight of the room resisted. Every eye was on Crockett. Every camera lens was fixed on her lips. The power Barrett believed she held had begun to slip, rebalancing itself in the space between them. And then came Crockett's first strike, a line, so sharp it sliced the courtroom silence. The silence broke like glass. Judge Barrett's gavel slammed again, louder this time. the wood splintering the tension that had thickened like smoke. "Congresswoman," she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut. "You will not lecture this court. Answer the question as it was asked, or I will hold you in contempt." The words weren't procedure anymore. They were threat. Crockett's chin lifted slightly, a flicker of defiance crossing her face. She didn't flinch. She didn't fold. Instead, her voice carried steady across the chamber, smooth as polished steel. "Contempt," she said softly, "isn't something you can hand down like a sentence. Judge, it's something you earn from the people when you abuse your power." The gallery gasped audibly. Barrett's eyes widened, then narrowed, as if she couldn't believe what she just heard. The gavel struck again, but this time it sounded desperate, like a hammer failing to nail down a storm. And just like that, the moment spilled beyond the walls of the courtroom. Clips hit Twitter within minutes. Jasmine Crockett just ended Barrett with one sentence. Crockett claps back. Read one post, racking up thousands of retweets in real time. On TikTok, users clipped Crockett's line over dramatic music, zooming on Barrett's stunned expression with captions, "When the teacher realizes the student studied harder than her." Inside the courtroom, Barrett's composure began to crack. Her voice rose, harsher now, stripped of its practiced calm. "You are out of line," she barked, pointing her gavel like a weapon. "This is my courtroom, Congresswoman. My authority will not be questioned." But Crockett's response was like water against fire, smooth, controlled, refusing to rise to Barrett's volume. "With respect," she said, every syllable deliberate, "your authority is supposed to serve justice, not silence it. And right now, all the world can see is a judge trying to muzzle the truth." The words landed like thunder. Reporters' pens flew furiously across their pads. Cameras zoomed so close that every micro-expression, every twitch of Barrett's lips, every unblinking second of Crockett's stare was preserved for history. On Instagram Reels, captions exploded across the clips. "She came prepared. Barrett's bias exposed live." The hashtag #Crockett claps back surged into trending, joined quickly by Bench vs Truth and Jazz vs Amy. But inside, Barrett doubled down. She leaned forward, her voice quivering now with restrained fury. "You will not turn this into a political circus. You sit here because you were called, not because you have the right to lecture this bench. Answer the question or you will be removed." Crockett's hands folded calmly on the desk. Her voice didn't waver. "I was called here to speak the truth," she said. "And I will answer every question, but I won't answer them under the shadow of intimidation. Justice is not theater." And yet, she gestured subtly toward Barrett. "Here you are playing director." The room erupted again. Whispers, gasps, even muffled laughter in the back rows. Barrett's face flushed, her authority slipping with every reaction she failed to suppress. And online? The internet turned it into a storm. TikTok edits looped Barrett slamming her gavel with the caption, "When you lose the argument but won't admit it." Others spliced Crockett's calm responses into motivational soundtracks, trending under "How to Stay Cool Under Fire." Barrett tried to reclaim the stage. Her voice boomed now, louder than ever, almost shouting, "You are here under oath, and you will follow the rules of this courtroom. You are not above the law." Crockett leaned forward finally, her tone sharpening just slightly, not loud, not frantic, but piercing in its precision. "No one is above the law," she replied. Her eyes locked on Barrett's. "Not even those who hide behind the bench." On social media, the line detonated. Twitter's trending bar lit up. "Not even the bench dash or Crockett claps back." Memes appeared instantly. Barrett drawn as a crumbling statue. Crockett standing tall before it with the caption, "Truth doesn't bow." Barrett pounded her gavel so hard it nearly tipped from her hand. "Order," she roared, the word cracking in her throat. "I will not tolerate this disrespect." But the louder she grew, the calmer Crockett seemed. And the contrast was devastating. Barrett's voice shook with rage, while Crockett's cut through with the precision of a scalpel. Every rebuttal from Barrett only deepened the audience's sense that she was losing. Not control of the courtroom, but control of herself. Reporters in the gallery exchanged wide-eyed looks. One whispered, almost reverently, "She's dismantling her in real time." And online, the hashtag spread like wildfire. Crockett claps back. "Truth vs power, not above the law." The internet had chosen its hero. Barrett, red-faced, tried one final tactic, intimidation. Her voice dropped low, dangerous. "Careful, Congresswoman. This is contempt territory. One more word out of turn, and you will regret it." Crockett paused, just long enough for the silence to ache. She leaned toward the mic, her words deliberate, unshakable. "Judge, the only thing I regret is that the people watching have to see justice treated like a personal weapon. The chamber fell into stunned silence. And then came the wave of applause. It started in the gallery, soft at first, a few claps breaking through the tension. Security moved quickly to hush it, but the sound had already rippled through the air like a declaration. Barrett's eyes flared in fury, but the applause had sealed it. The people had chosen their side. On TikTok, the clip went viral instantly. Edits layered Crockett's words over storm footage, with captions, "And the storm broke." Twitter users quoted it endlessly. "The only thing I regret is that justice is treated like a weapon." Barrett slammed her gavel again and again, demanding silence. But the room no longer belonged to her. The narrative had slipped beyond her grip, carried by Crockett's calm defiance into millions of feeds, timelines, and hearts. And then, just when it seemed Crockett had delivered her sharpest line, she leaned back in her chair, eyes steady, lips curving ever so slightly. She had one more sentence. One sentence that no one saw coming. One sentence that would flip the entire trial upside down. The courtroom was already vibrating with tension, like a violin string pulled too tight, when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward. She hadn't raised her voice once during the clash, hadn't allowed Barrett's interruptions or cold authority to pull her off balance. And now at last it was her turn. She began with calm precision, her words deliberate, each syllable landing like a measured drumbeat. "You've spent this entire proceeding dismissing not my arguments, not my facts, but me." Her eyes locked on Barrett's, unflinching. "And the irony, Judge, is that in doing so, you've proven exactly what I came here to expose." For a moment, Barrett's gavel hovered in her hand. The courtroom seemed to lean closer, breaths held, as Crockett's voice cut through the air. "You speak of order," Crockett continued, "but what you really mean is obedience. You speak of law, but you wield it like a sword against those you believe don't belong in your America. The problem, Judge, is that your America is too small for the rest of us." A gasp rippled across the gallery. Even the reporters, usually careful to remain invisible, exchanged wide-eyed glances as their fingers froze on keyboards. The words carried a weight that was more than rhetoric. It was accusation. It was defiance. It was truth. Sharpened to a point and aimed directly at Barrett's armor. Barrett's jaw tightened. She reached for her authority, lifting the gavel. "Order," she snapped, striking once, then again. But the sound was brittle, drowned out by the murmurs already spreading like wildfire. The gavel was wood against wood. Crockett's words were fire against dry leaves. And Crockett wasn't finished. "You say I lack credibility. But credibility is not granted from a bench. It is earned in the lives we fight for. You claim I lack respect, but respect is not owed to arrogance wrapped in robes. Respect is built through fairness, humility, and justice. And on those measures, Judge Barrett," Crockett's pause stretched, heavy as silence before a storm, "you fail." The blow landed without theatrics. It was the simplicity that made it devastating. No shouting, no flourish, just the weight of unvarnished truth, echoing against the vaulted ceiling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Cameras clicked like nervous ticks, microphones hummed with static, and somewhere in the back row, a spectator's breath came ragged and loud. For the first time that day, Barrett didn't respond immediately. Her eyes flickered, not broken but rattled. For a figure built on control, the smallest crack was seismic. The gallery could feel it, the shift, the imbalance of power tipping, slowly but unmistakably in Crockett's direction. Social media caught it instantly. Clips of Crockett's words, paired with captions like, "Too small for the rest of us," and "Respect is not owed to arrogance," began circulating online before the gavel even fell again. On Twitter, hashtags like #JarCrockettMicDrop and "Our Truth to Power" lit up screens across the nation. TikToks appeared within minutes, splicing her line with cheering crowds, reaction gifs, even protest footage set to pounding bass lines. But inside the courtroom, nothing could top the real moment. Barrett tried again, her voice raised now. "Order! This is a courtroom, not a campaign stage." Crockett didn't flinch. She simply looked back, poised, serene, and said, "No, Judge, this is America, and America is watching." Another wave of murmurs rolled through the chamber, like a current surging against the dam. Even Barrett's gavel, slammed hard enough to echo, couldn't push it back. The sound of authority was collapsing under the sound of truth. It wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a reversal. Barrett, once towering and untouchable, suddenly seemed smaller, like a general losing control of her army, while Crockett, underestimated from the start, rose in stature with each heartbeat of silence. Reporters scribbled frantically. Courtroom sketches would capture this moment as history. One woman seated high on the bench, her grip tightening, her expression faltering. Another standing proud below, eyes steady, unbroken. The balance of the room had shifted. Everyone knew it, even Barrett. And in that charged silence, heavy as thunderclouds before the rain, one truth became inescapable. Crockett had not just defended herself. She had exposed the fragility of the authority that sought to silence her. The nation would remember this silence more than the gavel, more than the objections, more than the shouting, because silence in that moment spoke louder than power, and that silence was only the beginning of the storm. The gavel's echo faded, but Crockett's words still hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. And almost instantly, the courtroom ceased to be just a courtroom, became the stage for a national moment. By the time reporters stepped into the marble hallways, headlines were already drafted, their phrasing sharp and dramatic. Crockett silences Barrett, a courtroom showdown for the ages. Respect must be earned, Crockett's line that shook the bench. America was watching and Crockett delivered. Cable news anchors scrambled to cut into scheduled programming, screens flickering, from economic reports and political chatter to the footage of Crockett's mic drop. Her words replayed again and again, each network punctuating them with breathless commentary. On social media, the wildfire became an inferno, Twitter trends stacked on top of each other. Crockett claps back. A truth to power, your Barrett exposed. Mic drop moment. A 10-second clip of Crockett declaring, "Respect is not owed to arrogance wrapped in robes." Hit over 1 million views within an hour. TikTok stitched it with dancing edits, protest footage, even sports clips where athletes dunked, scored, or spiked balls the moment she delivered her line. Memes flooded Instagram, Barrett's stern face. Superimposed on crumbling statues, Crockett's words written in bold fonts across burning sunsets, rising fists and vintage protest art. On Reddit, long threads dissected every detail. Her tone, her composure, Barrett's flinch. Some users called it the moment authority cracked. Others dubbed it a masterclass in controlled fire. Even Barrett's loyal supporters struggled. Conservative pundits tried to spin the moment as grandstanding, but their clips, clipped out of context, only amplified Crockett's original words. Hashtags mocking their defenses trended faster than their arguments. For once, the machinery of spin sputtered. In barbershops, college dorms, subway stations, and kitchen tables, people were talking. Did you see what she said? Did you feel that? The moment crossed demographics. Young activists, disillusioned elders, even people who normally avoided politics were suddenly invested. Pride surged. Collective empowerment rippled. It wasn't just that Crockett had stood up to a judge. It was that she had spoken what so many felt but hadn't been able to say. Her calm defiance resonated like a national chord struck in unison. Late-night talk show hosts opened with the clip, then paused for applause before joking. Barrett brought a gavel, but Crockett brought the hammer. Studio audiences roared. Celebrities chimed in on Instagram stories, posting Crockett's words over black backgrounds with captions like, "Say it louder." The atmosphere felt different, electric, like a moment people knew they'd remember. Commentators compared it to iconic courtroom showdowns of history, a turning point where one voice shifted the narrative. And Barrett? In the silence after her authority cracked, her image dimmed. Once projected as untouchable, she was now reduced to reaction shots, replayed endlessly, the tight jaw, the flinch, the falter. Every second of hesitation became its own headline. But Crockett's presence grew. Her name, her face, her words were everywhere, carved into the cultural conversation. And yet, as powerful as the immediate shockwave was, the true force of her words had just begun, because Crockett's mic drop wasn't only a rebuttal to Barrett. It was something bigger, something alive. It was a rallying cry. When the noise of headlines and hashtags finally softened, what remained was not just a viral moment, but a lesson etched into the nation's conscience. Crockett's defiance was never about spectacle. It was about something deeper, something rare. In a space designed to intimidate, she chose to embody dignity. In a system tilted toward authority, she chose to remind us that truth has weight of its own. The clash between Judge Barrett and Representative Crockett was more than a courtroom exchange. It became symbolic of a much larger struggle between rigid institutional power and the courage to question it. Barrett wielded authority like a weapon, certain that her gavel, her robe, and her reputation were shields too strong to be pierced. But Crockett showed the country that integrity, wielded with calm precision, is sharper than intimidation. Her words cut through the formality, reminding people that respect cannot be demanded through fear. It must be earned through fairness, humility, and justice. That reminder resonated because it spoke to an American truth. Our nation was built, not on silence in the face of power, but on resistance against it. For many, the image of Crockett standing her ground was not just empowering, it was healing. It told ordinary people that the battles they face daily, against unfair bosses, corrupt systems, dismissive authorities, are not theirs alone. Watching her meant watching someone turn quiet frustration into bold articulation. And in doing so, she became a mirror for a collective yearning. The bigger meaning was never about one trial, one clash, or even one judge. It was about reclaiming dignity in spaces where it is too often stripped away. Crockett reminded us that justice is not a performance of robes and gavels. It is the living, breathing act of truth spoken fearlessly. And perhaps that is why her moment traveled so far, beyond the courtroom, beyond the trending charts, into conversations about who we are as a people. We celebrate strength, yes, but more than that, we celebrate the kind of strength that uplifts rather than oppresses. Crockett gave us a reminder that in America, the voice of one person, clear, unwavering, unapologetic, still has the power to shake the walls of authority. In that courtroom, surrounded by silence and power, she proved something timeless. Truth doesn't shout. It resonates. In that courtroom, surrounded by silence and power, she proved something timeless. Truth doesn't shout. It resonates. And if this moment shook you the way it shook that courtroom, don't just watch. Be part of the story. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter of power, drama, and truth colliding. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Crockett's stand the spark we've all been waiting for? And if you felt that fire in your chest, tap like so this story reaches even more voices who need to hear it. Because here it's not just content, it's a movement. And your voice makes it louder.